Welcome to Just Folks Conversations with Emma. I'm Emma, and today we're going to have a really wonderful conversation with one of my dear friends. I want to introduce you to Sharita Brown. Charita and I go back, quite a few years actually. Our girls were in school together, um, although my daughter is a few years older than her two gorgeous young ladies. But we used to meet and chat in the afternoons as we were picking the kids up from school. And so that's when our friendship started. And we've stayed in touch over the years. And during that time, I've come to understand that Sharita has amazing expertise in the field of mental health. And so today we're going to talk about everything, because we always do. We love to talk, we love to chat. But she is certainly a mental health advocate. And so without any more words from me, I would like to introduce you to my dear friend, Sharita Brown. Hi, Sharita.
Hi, Emma. Hi, folks.
I'm so glad you could join me today. The weather is kind of messy outside. It's cold.
Yeah.
It's not as bad here as it is in Texas. So we're going to send up some prayers and some love
Yes,
and light to folks who are struggling there. But
absolutely.
so where would you like to start? You know what? I need to say something else before we go a little further. One of the
Okay.
things that you've done, Sharita, which we can come back to, we'll circle back to it, is you're an author and you have written a book, which I would certainly advise everyone to get a copy of and to just carefully and in the time when you can not be disturbed, sit back and really go on a journey. The title of the book is called Defying the Verdict. And Charita has a life story really to tell, but it's really a story of inspiration. So, Charita,
Okay. I love
take
to
it away.
hold the book up because I think the book is gorgeous. This is
It
Defying the
is.
Verdict, My Bipolar Life.
Mm.
It was thought in 1982 when I was a senior at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. I had a psychotic break. When I came back home to Baltimore, doctors informed my parents that I would probably never have real quality of life because of the severity and frequency of my episodes. So, what they thought was that eventually I would need a caretaker, a custodian, because whenever your brain takes those hits, which is mania and depression, and it used to be called manic depression, and actually, that's a pretty accurate description of what happens. You have high highs where you think you are, absolutely the greatest. And then you have low lows where you are just like laying on the floor depressed.
Mm.
And then there are norms in the middle. But the more hits your brain takes, the less likely it is for you to recover. So for me, even to be able to sit here and talk to you, Emma, it's miraculous. It's triumphant.
Well, and that is the miracle, but it's also the beauty of who you are. I think for the audience, we should talk a little bit about um, when what that experience was like for you when you were first diagnosed. You were a teenager. You were like 19 or so,
Well,
18,
I was
19.
actually first diagnosed at 21.
Oh, at 21.
I
Okay.
was diagnosed at, that's close. that's
Okay.
that's close. I was first diagnosed at 21, but you remember the story though, Emma, because I had my first depressive episode at 16, but
Okay.
I didn't have any diagnosis until 21. And so the good thing about that was that I was diagnosed early enough that I could get help. It's the earlier the diagnosis is, the earlier you can treat what it is that you're going through. And the reason I finally decided to tell my story of having bipolar disorder is because people need to understand that you can live well with a mental health challenge. And people don't know that. Like they think of people that have bipolar because of the way the media characterizes us as people that are shooting up movie theaters, doing this, doing that. And some people are. But people who have mental health challenges are more likely to be victims of crimes than to be the people that are committing crimes.
Why
So
do
it's
you say that? More likely
because
to be the victim.
people take advantage of people who they see to be more vulnerable. And people with mental health challenges are seen to be more vulnerable in this society. So those are the people whose money you're going to steal. Those are the people who you're going to get them in a ruse so you can, do a get over, as people would say. So, those are the people that you're going to rob because, oh, he has money, but I can get his money away from him. Or she has money and I can get her money away from her. So, because she doesn't have soundness of mind or that balance. So that's why people victimize, or how people victimize people who have mental health challenges.
So at 21, when you were in college and you
Mm.
had a major episode, and you
Yeah.
call it a hit, what did that feel like for you?
Um, I thought that everything was wonderful. I was actually taken to the emergency room at the hospital, the regular, the was called Middlesex Memorial Hospital. I was taken to, I was at my girlfriend's house. Her mom was actually a therapist. I'm not sure which therapist she was, but she was a therapist. And she took me to the hospital.
And you were out of
And
state, so we're in Baltimore
I
right
was in
now. So
Connecticut.
you're in
Yeah,
Connecticut,
I was in
okay?
Connecticut. So I was out of state and they took me to the hospital. And when they took me to the hospital, two doctors committed me. They said that I was a danger to myself and others because I really was out of my mind. They got my dad to come from Baltimore to come, and he thought he was coming so that he could come and get me and take me home. But when he came, they said it would be too dangerous so I was committed to a hospital, and there was nothing that he could do but leave his daughter and go home.
So what were you thinking? What do you remember about that?
I remember being in the hospital and thinking that it was Ernest Hemingway's clean, well-lighted place. I was seeing things, everything was bright. And I remember that I had strength like I never had before. I was really strong, like I could pick things up. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. I can pick things up that I, just ordinarily wouldn't be able to pick up. And the most important thing to understand is there is a term, and I can't think of the doctor who coined the term. I apologize to him. The term is anosognosia.
Say
And
that
the
again,
term
please.
anosognosia, it's a
Okay,
Greek word,
okay.
and it just means that you just don't know. You're not aware of the state of mind that you are in. So everybody else can see that something is wrong. But for me, I was just doing great, feeling
Mm.
great, doing great. Everything was fine. I was, top of the world. And in fact, all of my thoughts were confused and I didn't know what was happening, and I was committed. That was what happened to me. And I went to the hospital for 15 days. And because I was 21, they wanted me to take a medication. I refused. And they couldn't make me because I was 21. I actually wish that somebody could have been able to make. That's just part of my story. That I didn't know. So you don't know what you don't know.
Okay, we lost the volume just for a second. You
Right.
said you wish someone had made you take the medication, but
Uh-huh.
because you were 21, you had the right to refuse it, and you
Yes.
did. Okay.
And according to HIPAA, at 18, you are an adult. So at 18, you make your own medical decisions. So no one can tell you what to do. You decide for yourself. So at 21, I was deciding for myself what I thought was best. And I don't know why, I didn't want to take medicine. So it was like, I didn't take any. And that was a mistake. And then by 1982, I had taken time off from school. I came back. And by 1982, shortly before, that was 1980 into 1981. By 1982, a couple months before graduation, I had a psychotic break. And so that was when my parents and I got the diagnosis that I would probably eventually end up needing a caretaker. That's when we got there.
How did that impact your family?
It was very difficult. It threw the homeostasis of the family off. Later in life, I just really felt indebted to my family because I was fortunate that my family really supported me. They didn't like throw me to the wolves or say, oh my goodness, we can't do this. And I'll throw in here that I have a genetic illness. So because it is a genetic illness, it was harder for my mom because it comes from my mom's side of the family. It wasn't it wasn't so tough as tough for my dad, but it's going to be tough on the family when you have a child who, 21 is still your child, 22 is still your child. When you have a child who is ill and who has an illness of that magnitude.
So what happened after this second episode?
There was a third, there was a fourth. I was in denial. When I finally decided to accept the diagnosis, that was when I was able to get better. And when I talk to people about mental health challenges, the thing that I tell them is acceptance is so important. You're not going to get the help that you need until you can accept what is going on with you. For me, there are therapists. There are people who are trained to help people with mental health challenges. I am a lived experience expert because of what I have lived and because of how I have used my helps, to make my way through. As Mr. Rogers said to the children years ago, he would say, look for the helpers. That's what you look for. There are always people who can help you. And so for me, I eventually wrote the book. I came out of what Dr. Kay Jamison, who endorsed my book, she wrote An Unquiet Mind. She calls it the silently successful. There are people living with severe mental health challenges who are doing well. For the people who don't know, Emma, and you and I have already talked about this, the severe mental health, there are many mental health diagnoses like anxiety and OCD and depression, but the most severe of the mental health diagnoses are schizophrenia, major depression, and bipolar disorder. Of the different types of bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 disorder, which I have been diagnosed with, which is up, down, up, down, up, down, is considered to be the most severe of the bipolar diagnoses. Now, because I've studied bipolar, I really think rapid cycling bipolar is really difficult, because there are people who have, and that's if you have 4 or more episodes a year, or there are some people who have are episodic within 2 months. They are up, then they're okay, then they're down, or they're up, down. And to me, that's very, very frightening. But what we have to understand is that if you put a plan in place, you can do well. There is a woman who in the late 90s, early 2000s, created a plan that she calls RAP, and it's a registered trademark RAP. My
Spell that, please.
WRAP.
Okay.
The plan that I created for myself, I created in 1987. So my plan actually predated her plan by more than 10 years. The interesting thing about the two plans is how similar they are, because what works, works.
Okay. And what are the components?
The components of my plan are, I take medication. Everyone doesn't need medication. I see a psychiatrist. Everyone doesn't need a psychiatrist. There is therapy. There is eating well, exercising, resting well, and not just laying down, but getting adequate rest, getting restful sleep, staying away from triggers, knowing what your triggers are. Like all of us have things that stress us. So you got to know what stresses you. You have to look at what your stressors are and try to stay away as much as possible, minimizing those things. Another thing that I do is I have accountability partners. I have people who are watching with me to make sure that I am on track as far as my health. And, you know, you can have as many as you want, but it's good to have at least one person that is in your corner watching for you. And everybody doesn't need medication. Some people just need a friend. Some people just need somebody who, when you talk to them, they can sift what you're saying through their hands and not hold it against you, but just allow you to speak it. A lot of times we really do need people to listen. You know, you're such a great listener, Emma, and I'm not saying that to pet your flesh. I'm saying that because you're such a great listener. So a lot of times people don't have anybody to listen to them. You know, we're in this age of video games and, you know, everybody's on their phone, and I'm comparing myself to what you're doing on social media. As Pastor Stephen Furtick said, one of the problems in life now is that we are comparing our real lives to somebody else's highlight reel. And
that's very insightful.
Yes, and that can be a problem. You have to understand that what you're watching on somebody's Facebook or their Instagram or their Twitter, that's not or their TikTok or their Snapchat. That's not their whole life. That is curated.
Right.
You have to understand, when you are seeing something that is curated, those people have real life too. And so you have to understand that. So, but rest, meaningful rest is really important. For me, I also pray a lot. I am someone that really believes in prayer, and I meditate. There are people who do yoga. There are people who do mindfulness meditation. I actually meditate on scripture. I'm a Christian, and I believe that the scripture is the word of God, and I meditate on what the word of God says. Now, everybody doesn't agree with what I say, but you can't say that somebody's story is not their story. So that's one of the things I love about life. Like, if you tell me what happened to you, I can't say that didn't happen to you. I can say, well, that's never happened to me, but I can't say that didn't happen to you.
Well, I'm looking at what you've laid out as part of your, I would just call it a management plan, really. These are the kinds of things that all of us ought to be able to have access to. Somebody to talk to, whether it's a professional or not, eating well, exercising, getting enough rest and sleep, knowing what our triggers are, having people we can trust, like the accountability partners you identified, and then the spiritual piece, some people approach this from a religious or spiritual level, and other people, like you say, do mindfulness practicing. Um, but this looks like just good health for anybody, everybody.
And I drink a lot of water.
Mm.
And water is good for your skin. So
Yes.
not only is water good for your organs, like I've had people say, well, what do you do for your skin? I drink water.
Well, I just said to you before we started, you should be a fashion model. You are absolutely gorgeous.
Well,
Um,
Emma, thanks.
and that's, that, well, I'm out of words, but really it's just, it's an inner glow. It's who you are as a person. And then you're physically, very beautiful. So you have just shared with us the high fashion models workshop methods for, looking fantastic.
The high fashion models put orange juice on cotton balls and stuff. Remember that from years ago,
Oh,
but I
no.
digress. When they had that waif look, when the
Okay.
models were looking real skinny,
Uh-huh.
people came against that because the teenage girls were doing that.
Mm,
They were like, mm-mm,
not
mm-mm.
healthy. Not
And
healthy.
because some of them, and they said they were putting orange juice on cotton balls and sucking what? Please eat a meal. Please eat a meal.
Yes. No, I somehow or other that one missed my attention. I'm not aware of that, but
You probably didn't have like a young girl at that time.
um, well, not that young, but the one that I do have was not easily influenced, It's like, that's not a choice I would make, Mom. So no. No.
And for me, the other thing that is really important to me is peace.
Mm,
Peace is really important to me. My older daughter, has what she calls somebody's whole thing. She'll be like, that's her whole thing. That's his whole thing. And I say, my whole thing is peace. I just want to have some peace. And I know that, I have the love of God and I want to have peace. My house is a place of peace. We don't have, well, since we're raising my baby niece, who's my sister's, who's my daughter's godchild. Sometimes it's a little more rambunctious up in here
mhm.
than we've been used to until the more recent years.
Mhm.
But she's a joy. But it's we're used to just, if you can't be peaceful, we need you to be on your way, because this is the place where I can control the atmosphere. I can't control the atmosphere outside. I can't control the atmosphere like at my mom's house. Now, one of the things, and I mean, this about me, is that I'm a caregiver.
Yes.
So I was a caregiver for my mother and my father. And this is what is amazing. I was caregiver for my mother and father. My dad passed away in December of 2019. We are graced to still have my mom, who will be
Yes.
89 in March. And, I'm still doing her care.
Yes.
And I should not be able to do this. And I'm homeschooling my little Demi. Well, I shouldn't say her name, but I'm homeschooling her. And the things that I am able to do just really for me testify that the Lord, He is the God. And other people have what they believe. And I'm not telling
Mhm.
people, as I said, what your story is or what you believe. But I know there's a scripture that says, the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself for me. And that's how I'm living. That's how I'm living life. And that's why I don't have any vanity about how I'm able to live, because God has done this for me, and I'm very, very, very grateful. I'm one of those people, like, it's like, thank you. Thank you. Every day it's thank you. When my children were younger, they they got to live, fortunately, with a mother who had, before she got married, had 2.5 good years of therapy and was able to raise them when she had a diagnosis that she wouldn't get married and she probably wouldn't have kids because she wouldn't have the mental balance to be able to do it. So I had 2.5 years of therapy where we worked on emotional strength. And so the emotional strength that I have was cultivated. So I know that other people can cultivate the same emotional strength because my therapist helped me cultivate emotional intelligence. You know, a lot of people, Emma, don't have emotional intelligence. I know people that are brilliant, like rocket science brilliant, and have no control of their emotions. They're everywhere, or no control of their spirituality. But there has to be a balance. There has to be a physical balance. There has to be an emotional balance. There has to be a mental balance. There has to be a spiritual balance. So for me, that's what I'm about, working on being balanced. And in these, since the beginning of 2019, this is 2021, so it's 2 years, I have been working on really having boundaries. Now, that wasn't something in my original plan, but that's something that I'm working on now.
Let me just ask you this. Has your plan, which is working so beautifully in defiance of what the verdict was for you, has it evolved? Because now I see you're adding balance, which was not what you mentioned initially. So was that the process for you?
Yes, there's been a process. The most recent thing that I added, all of it was about maintaining balance, maintaining symbiosis. All of it was about that. But what I added in 2019 was boundaries. Learning that Sharita Brown, it is okay for you to say no. You can say no. You don't have to say yes to everything people throw your way. And Boundaries is a book I read at the beginning of 2019 by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. What boundaries, having a boundary basically is you are the property and I am the property and I have a property line. So I have like a fence around myself, and my fence has a gate, and I control who comes in and who goes out. And also, if necessary, I can put barbed wire on the top of my fence in case people want to jump over, because that way they can't jump over. Because I have to control who gets to me. And then the other thing for me that's also in addition, I used to say, you know, people say glass half full, glass half empty. My glass is half full, my glass is half. Have you ever heard that?
I've heard it, yes.
Okay, well, I used to always say my glass is 3/4 full. Well, not anymore. And that's another thing within the last couple of years. I don't say that anymore. Okay. What I say is my glass has to be completely full, and I can give to you from the overflow. I cannot deplete myself to help you. So, and where all of that comes from is from the Lord. So I have to be full, and then you can have what the overflow is. So those are two additional things as I've grown. So I have giving to you, giving from the overflow. And I remember somebody teaching that, an older man who was a pastor many years ago. I think I heard him when I was like 20 years old, 2021. But giving from the overflow, because what he was talking about is when we have impurities in our spirit. He took a glass and he put something in the glass, like some paper, and then he poured water down in the glass until the paper rose and went out into the saucer. And he said that's what we need to do, be continually doing, continually filling ourselves up with good stuff so that that other stuff rises to the top and tops off and pops off. And so for me, this is similar to that, that I have to be full, and then I can give you what is excess. And I have to have boundaries around myself. So I can let you in my gate. You can come in, you can spend time, but when it's time for you to go, it's time for you to go. Some people can stay in. There are probably a few people can come and hang out, but everybody can't have that. And especially with me doing mental wellness advocacy, if I am going to be a mental wellness advocate, I have to be well so that I can help other people be well. It's like when you hear about physicians and they say, psychiatrists are some of the people who have the most difficult times, and therapists, because so much stuff is, poured on them. So
Yes.
therapists have therapists because you got to talk to somebody because of all the stuff you're taking in. So for me, I have a therapist now with the caregiving. I had to go back because I didn't have a therapist for years, but I needed somebody because the caregiving around the time my dad got really sick, and then it just became so much, and I was burning out. And I'm so grateful that I understood that there's not a problem being a Black lady to talk to somebody. Unfortunately, some people, go ahead.
And that's important because particularly with people of color, there's a traditional stigma that I'm seeing it being really eliminated gradually over seeking professional help.
Mhm.
We have not always had a good track record with being able to get the kind of support that we need, particularly with people who didn't share, I'd say, the same cultural norms and experiences, but not always. However, is that a factor for you?
Well, my therapist actually is not African American.
Mhm.
Um, it's There are not enough African American therapists. They're not. They're getting to be more. I think what you need is a person who is therapeutic and who understands what you're going through and can guide you through whatever it is that that you are going through. But they do have to understand where you are culturally. When you were talking about African American people, one of the things with those of us who are Black women is Black women, and I say this often in presentations, Black women are seen through the periscope of Mammy. And we are, Mammy, she took care of her children, your children, she cooked, she cleaned, she did everything. And as she did all of those things, she always had a smile. She never looked unhappy. Everything was great. Everything was grand. And so as Black women, we think, we have to have that kind of strength, balderdash. And then, Asian women. Asian women are like, well, we're too smart for that. And then we have Latina women, and they're like, well, work your way through it or pray your way through it. And, that's the same with Black women. That's the same with, so, I'm Black and I'm a Christian. So for many years, I heard people say, well, if you just pray, anoint your head with oil, pray, you'll be okay. And I do not speak against that. What I say, Emma, is if it is a more serious issue, you need to deal, like I had said with Mr. Rogers, you have to find the helpers. If, you might have a wonderful pastor. When I did the therapy that I did, I actually did my therapy with a pastoral counselor who was not my pastor, who was trained at Loyola, who had a master's degree in pastoral counseling. I had a wonderful pastor at the time. My pastor did not have the therapeutic ability to deal with what I was going through. So you'd find the person or persons who have the therapeutic ability to deal with who you are. because what's most important is that you be well.
Exactly. But how do you find these people? What's the process? So,
Well, for me, my pastor had found this pastor for me, and I had seen him for a year, and I didn't have an effective experience. But then some years later, I went and sought him out again. And then we had a 2.5 year effective process because I wasn't ready. If you're not ready for therapy, therapy will not work for you. If you're not ready to discuss the psychic baggage, then it's going to still be there because you're not ready to work through it. So you have to be ready to work through it. There are lots of places that you can look up. Like, I'm a member of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. You can call the National Alliance on Mental Illness helpline. You can text NAMI to 741-741. Someone will text you back. There are things that you can do. There is the Black Mental Health Alliance here in Baltimore. There are places that you can contact that will help you work through the process, that will help you find someone. If you, I go to Kaiser Permanente. That's my insurance, my HMO. I guess I'm advertising them now. They have therapy. So if you go to your, one of the best things, if you think you need someone, because I have done training through NAMI, I have done training for doctors and people that work in medical offices. One of the ways that people can get help, because they don't always want to say, oh, I need a therapist, oh, I need a psychiatrist. Go to your primary care doctor. Go to your primary care doctor. Let your primary care doctor know what you're going through. Primary care doctors know, and they have questionnaires that they can ask you and know if they need to recommend that you go somewhere else. And there are primary care, let's say you need some medication, there are primary care doctors who can't prescribe medication. So, but I would say, places like NAMI, places like the Black Mental Health Alliance, no matter what color you are, go, you can, NAMI is a fabulous place. As I said, I'm on the NAMI Maryland Board of Directors. I do in our own voice presentations for NAMI. I teach peer-to-peer, which is teaching people who have mental health challenges about mental health. I do something called in our own voice presentations, where people with mental health diagnoses talk to people that don't necessarily have a mental health diagnosis. Like, we might talk to a group of nurses, we might talk to BGE employees, but we're going and we're talking to them about mental health, because people need to understand that 1 in 5 people are going to be touched by a mental health challenge in any given year. In Maryland, it's 1 in 4. With COVID, the incidence of depression and anxiety has gone way up. Michelle Obama said on her podcast that she has suffered, and she's a balanced lady, that she has suffered with some low-level depression. And I was so glad that she said that, because she's Michelle Obama. And right. So a lot of people listen to her podcast. So when they heard that, it's like, oh, I'm dealing with some low-level depression, but Michelle Obama says so is she. So it makes it okay. It's like, and that's why, when we talk about the book, that was why I kind of bit the bullet and decided to write the book. I'm really private, and I'm not a person that's going to tell my business. And I had people even suggest to me, because of the difficulty, that I fictionalize the book. The woman at Columbia University, who teaches nonfiction, I had talked to her about my book, and her name is Liz Harris. And Liz suggested, she said, Charita, you might want to make this fiction, because this was in 2013, because it's such a tough thing to share. The reason I decided to share my book as a memoir is because I wanted people to know that it really happened. And I wanted people to know that I'm not an anomaly, and that if we set something up and live with it, it doesn't mean that you're never going to get sick. It doesn't mean that, things aren't going to go south. It doesn't mean that. It means that you have a plan. If the plan falls through, like when I first set up my plan, I didn't know I would end up in 25 plus years recovering. I didn't know that. I just knew, let's get some days. Let's try to get a year. Let's try, and in the meantime, I also had some fabulous people in my life. I had fabulous friends. My husband was full of faith. And even for him to marry me, because there was a thing with his family not wanting him to marry me because I had bipolar disorder. And some of the members of the family believed that, if I really believed God, that wouldn't have happened to me. Now, we know that's not true. And,
Right.
what I know is that what God did for me was he has given me an opportunity, just like Moses was kin to the children of Israel and he could bring them out, just like Joseph was kin to his brethren and he could bring them into Goshen and save them. I'm not saying I'm a savior. What I'm saying is, because I am kin to severe mental health challenges, and I have studied and I understand and I have compassion that came from God, and I'm not, because I used to be a haughty thing, but you can't be haughty and have bipolar. Nope. Can't do it. So as what I have is compassion and a desire to help other people one by one by one by one by one. Just have hope. My nephew's wife said to me after she read my book, she said she felt like just taking copies of the book and walking down the street and just going, here, have some hope. Here, have some hope. Because when we have a plan, and for me, I really believe that this was God's plan for my life. God knew that I was going to be sick. And he also knew that eventually, it took me a long time, I knew that I was supposed to write the book in 2009. I got it written in 2015. It was published in 2018. So it took me a while. It wasn't like God said, and no, God did not write on my wall or speak aloud to me. I prayed and asked God. Some people might know who Joyce Meyer is. Some people might not. In November of 2019, I read something that Joyce Meyer had written. And she said, everybody has at least one thing that God wants you to do. If you're a Christian, at least one. She said, so pray and ask God what your one is. Just ask him. Say, what's my one? So I did what she said. I prayed, I meditated, and my one was write a memoir. Took me a long time to get it done, but
you did it, and it's really a testament to your faith and your plan. And you look at the family that you were born into, the kind of support that you received while you were working your way through those early years. It's clear to me that they were really, critical. They were divinely, I would say they were divinely placed. You picked a really good family. And you have been a really excellent parent to your two daughters. If we just highlight for a second the things that you have done, you've lived a really full life.
I have.
Yes. Talk about some of the things that you've done, along the way.
I was a teacher, and I got hurt at school. So but one of the things, I'm a very optimistic person. I got hurt at school. And as a result of being hurt and having to retire, I got a blessing that most people don't get. As a single parent, I got to raise my kids. I got to know their friends. I got to know, I got to know what they were doing. I just got to really raise them. And because being a single parent, that doesn't always happen, that you get that kind of time to spend with your children and to feed into your children. So I was really blessed to be able to feed into my children. And another thing that I was able to do, I told you about having to develop emotional intelligence. Because I was able to develop that, I was able to put that into my children. And then another thing was, I'm going to say the school's name. Because I went to the Park School, the motto of the Park School used to be, at one point, go to Park School, learn to think. And people that I know, even if they did not like Park, I have a girlfriend who is my friend to this day since 7th grade, and she did not have the most positive Park School experience, but she will tell you that she learned to think, that she learned to think independently, that we learned that you don't have to regurgitate information. And for a while being in church, I was regurgitating what everybody was saying to me. But then, as they say with the prodigal son, I came to myself and I started using my ability to think and my ability to work a plan. As my husband used to say, you plan your work and you work your plan. And I was able to do that. And then I'll share something else about my husband that I didn't remember. I remembered that this morning, and it was so cool to me because I've been thinking about, my relationship with God and being in the center of God's will. And what my husband told me about love, and he was talking about being in a relationship. He said, the safest place in love is at the center, not at its fringes. So in our relationship, that was the endeavor, to be at the center of the relationship. And so when that came back to me this morning, what came to me was, in my relationship with God, I'm centering myself. And that's what's helping me to make my way through all of this. I told you that my father died in 2019. On May 31st, 2020, my eldest sister, Valerie, who was my main accountability partner, died of a sudden stroke. So I'm still going through grief, and it's grief. It's not depression. It's not any of that. And the thing that is wonderful is that I've been left with the lessons she taught me. And, I'm still going through. I'm in a grief group. I'm still going through. And I understand that God knows seasons. God knows, what we're going to go through. And what the testament to, how the plan works and how the plan has worked for me is that when my husband died when I was 31 and I had a 6-month-old and a 19-month-old, I didn't fall apart. I moved back to Baltimore. I lived with my parents. I had family support. Eventually, in like a couple years, I moved into my own home with my kids. When my husband died, I went to grief group. I went to grief therapy. When my sister died, and I knew I needed to go to grief therapy. So I'm in grief therapy now, in a grief group that meets weekly. So I knew that was what I needed. I knew what was going to help me. But the amazing thing, Emma, is that given that it's a pandemic and all the things that are going on, I have some physical things that are going on with my body. I'm managing care for my mom. I'm managing care for a 7-year-old. I'm doing all of these things with a severe mental illness diagnosis. And I am smiling and I am good and God is good. And I don't know what else to say. I am just, as I told you earlier, I don't think we were filming. I think I just told you.
Mhm.
I'm just so grateful for the life that I'm so grateful.
And it is absolutely an exemplary life. It's a beautiful life, which is why I love talking to you. And I just can't thank you enough for for writing your book, for living your life, for being the advocate that you are so selflessly. You share, you're joyous, you're beautiful from the inside all the way to the outside. You have integrity. You know,
Thank you.
I'm really honored to know you, and I thank you so much for taking time to be on my little program here.
I love you, Emma.
Well, I just love you right back. But you never know who's going to see this, Sharita. And, you know, there's a message for somebody who's not expecting to receive. This is like an inoculation in a way, I think. It's like a vaccine, you know, knowing that there is help, seeing you, you know, living your life fully. And it is a beautiful life. You know, look at what you've accomplished. You know, most of us want to do just what you're doing who don't have a diagnosis of anything in particular. We're just, you know, regular people. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're living your life to the fullest. You've been given some gifts, some challenges, and through all of that, you're still able to shine and to bring love to the table. And you are a testament to faith and works. So I thank you, Sharita.
I thank you, Emma. It's been a pleasure and a blessing.
Absolutely. So we'll sign off now, but we might even do a part two. You never know. Um,
I'm
I'm sure.
open.
Oh, wonderful. Then you've made my day. Now you said it publicly. We'll definitely do a part two. So thank you again. I know everyone's going to learn a lot from seeing this, and I suspect they're going to watch it a couple times, as well as listen to it on Anchor Podcast, because we're going to podcast it as well. So have a great evening. Hugs to your little great niece there, the little
Yeah.
7-year-old. She keeps you full of energy. I can see that. I think I've been listening to her a little bit in the background, but I'll be seeing you soon.
All right, my dear. I love you.
Love you back.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.